Hello Cardinals, and welcome to my tutorial on multiplying mixed numbers. As you can see on my slide, I've broken down the steps for this problem to make it simpler to understand. But before I talk about my steps and before we do some examples, I wanted to talk about the skills that we've already learned that are going to help us to solve these problems. Because whenever we see a problem that has multiple steps, it sometimes can make us feel a little intimidated. But the great news about multiplying mixed numbers is you're just going to incorporate skills that you have already learned and put those skills together to be able to solve this sort of problem. So the information or the knowledge that we already have that's going to help us is multiplying whole numbers. That's very simple. We've been doing since 3rd grade and now again in 4th grade. We also learned last week how to multiply fractions. So you learned how to multiply unit fractions that have numerators of 1, and then later in the week you also learned how to multiply other fractions that had numerators other than 1. The next skill that you have already learned that will help us today is to convert an improper fraction to a mixed number. And then finally, we're going to use our knowledge about addition to be able to combine some different steps of our problem and come to our final solution. So let's take a look at our steps first, and then we will attempt some problems together. So in my example on this slide, my problem is 4 times 2 2/3. So the mixed number is 2 2/3. When we multiply mixed numbers, the first 2 steps are simply decomposing the mixed number into its whole, which is 2 in this example, and into its fractional part, which the fractional part in this mixed number is 2/3. 2 plus 2/3 equals 2 2/3. So in our first step of the problem, we're going to take the whole number from our mixed number, which is 2, and we're simply going to multiply it by the first factor in our problem. So my first step in this example is 4 times 2 equals 8. Pretty straightforward. Again, we already know, we have lots of knowledge about multiplying simple whole numbers. Step 2 is where we are going to take our fractional part and multiply it again by that first factor. So in this example, it's 4 times 2/3, and of course we multiply 4 by the numerator, so 4 times 2 equals 8, and our denominator stays the same. So this piece is simply multiplying fractions. Then you're going to have to change that product, 8 2/3, and convert it to a mixed number. In this case, 8/3 is equivalent to 2 2/3. The final step of the problem is just to simply combine or add your solution from step 1 and step 2. So down here I have 8, which was my solution from step 1, plus 2/3, which was the solution from step 2. 8 plus 2/3 equals, 8 plus 2 2/3 equals 10 2/3, because 8 plus 2 is 10, and then my 2/3 is just along for the ride. So now that you've seen a breakdown of the steps, let's try a couple together. In my first example, I have 3 times 2 4/5. So my first step is going to be to multiply my whole numbers. So I'll take 3 times 2 equals 6. Nice and easy. Step 2 is to multiply my fractional part. So in this case, it's 3 times 4/5 equals, when we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerator. 3 times 4 equals 12, and my denominator stays the same, 12/5. Now I'm going to convert that to a mixed number, so I ask myself, how many times does 5 go into 12? Well, I know that 5 times 2 equals 10. So 5 goes into 12 2 times. And if I do 2 times 5 is 10, there are 2 left over to get me to 12. So my mixed number is 2 and 2/5. Now I'm in step 3, which is when I combine my two solutions from step 1 and step 2. So I'm going to do 6 plus 2 and 2/5. I'll add my whole numbers. 6 plus 2 equals 8. And then my fractional part is just along for the ride, 2/5. So my solution is 8 and 2/5. Let's see if we can do another one. My second problem reads 4 times 5 and 2/3. So my first step is to multiply my whole numbers. 4 times 5 equals 20. The second step is to multiply the fractional part. 4 times 2/3. When I multiply fractions, I just multiply the numerator. 4 times 2 equals 8, and my denominator stays the same. Now I have an improper fraction that needs to be changed to a mixed number. So I ask myself, how many times does 3 go into 8? I know that 3 times 2 equals 6. If 3 times 2 is 6, but I need to reach 8 total, I have 2 more to get to 8, and then my denominator is remaining 3. All right, my third step in my algorithm is to combine the parts from step 1 and step 2. So I have 20 plus 2 and 2/3. 20 plus 2 equals 22. And my fractional part comes along for the ride, 2/3. So my solution is 22 and 2/3. Thank you for watching, and now you know how to multiply whole numbers and mixed numbers.